In the episode right before this one, you learned 4 powerful techniques that you can use right away to hook your listeners in and keep them listening till the end of every episode. But if you want to be able to convert those listeners into leads, then you're also going to have to understand how to make your communication even more relevant to the person listening so that they understand why they need to work with you versus someone else who might do something similar to you. So I've got Brandon Lucero back in the studio with me to break this down for you and show you how you can start converting your casual listeners into dedicated clients through problem-specific content. Welcome to Insider Secrets to a Top 100 podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Elmer. Let's make your business binge-worthy. Brandon, it's awesome to have you here. I am so excited to dig into what we're going to talk about today because you're someone who has spent the last 5 years studying persuasive communication. And you have a track record of helping thousands of entrepreneurs generate millions of dollars in revenue in their business just by changing the way they talk about what they do, talk about their offers, talk about what it is that they teach. And I know you know me, I'm all about psychology and kind of getting to what is it that actually drives human behavior? How can we communicate in a way where it's like an automatic yes, like, yes, I want to work with you. Yes, I want to learn from you. And one of the biggest things that we see with podcast hosts is that no matter how much value they give away inside their episodes, their downloads aren't increasing. Their episodes aren't converting listeners to leads and to clients. So I'd love to start there and see if you could help unpack for us what some of the biggest mistakes are that causes this to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest mistake, and honestly, it's not even just podcasting. It's just content in general, like longer form content, webinars or stuff you do in your launches and stuff. The biggest mistake is just over teaching. And, we've been kind of trained or indoctrinated into this belief that we should just give our best stuff away for free. And the only way to add value is to just like give out more information. But when you look at like the best-selling books and things like that, none of them are encyclopedias or step-by-step things. They're always stuff that are hyper-relevant to what you're going through. Usually it's related to a problem. They demonstrate an understanding of where you're at, and then they introduce these new concepts, but they don't really teach you how to do a lot of things. Like, that's what your course or your service or your program is for. And so the biggest mistake is just over-teaching. So you trick people into thinking they have everything they need, or you overwhelm them. And then just not becoming relevant to the listener. And when you become hyper relevant to the listener, that's when we start to get these effects where people are like thinking automatically like, oh my gosh, they're speaking to me, or how did you get inside my head? And a lot of people don't do that. They just get up on a podcast and they just start talking and teaching without any consideration of like what's going through the listener's mind, how they're understanding or perceiving things. And then also, what is the next step? Like when you're doing a podcast episode, you should know what the next step is and gear your communication in that direction.
Yeah. And look, we have people on our workshops now who are like, oh my gosh, you are in my head. This is me, like times 10. But it used to not always be that way. Like I used to be the person that would spend 4 hours creating an Instagram post that I thought was insightful. And I would post it and I'd get like 2 likes and 4 spam comments and 0 people in the DMs being like, hey, I would love to work with you. What's the next step? And I feel like this is a common experience for so many people where they're like, I'm spending all this time creating content, whether that be short form content, podcast, long form content, teaching workshops, even getting on sales calls, and they're not seeing the ROI or the result on the back end. And one of the things that we have worked with you on extensively through the years, I mean, you've helped us double the revenue of our signature offer just by changing the way we've talked about what we do. But when I say changing the way, it really was getting clear on what problems do we solve and understanding what a problem is to begin with. So can you unpack that for us? Like, what is a problem and why should we be focusing on this more in our messaging?
Yeah. So this is like the golden nugget is the problems that you solve. Because a lot of people have their skills, they have their knowledge, they know what their degrees are in, they know what their experience is in. And so that's what they talk about. But that's all solution. That's all how to fix something. And if people don't know that they need that solution, then it's not really relevant. So you have to understand your audience is only coming to you, listening to you, going to buy from you because they have a problem that they think that you can solve. If you don't understand that, your communication is going to be very, very difficult. The way I like to explain this, I'll give a quick analogy. If you have stomach pain and it starts at 7:30 at night, ends at 8:30 at night, it's been going on for 2 weeks, you see 9 doctors and they have no idea what's wrong with you, you're going to feel like, oh man, like there's no hope in sight. I'm going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life. Like, it's not going to be a very good feeling. But that's where your audience is at right now. They're experiencing problems. And no one's been able to tell them what it is, why it's happening, or how to fix it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have the problem anymore. But if you go to that 10th doctor and the 10th doctor takes one look at you, you don't even say anything. And they go, let me guess, stomach pain that starts at 7:30 at night, ends at 8:30 at night. And you're going to be like, yes. Oh my gosh, how'd you know? And the doctor's like, oh yeah, we've seen a lot of people that you have stomach loop. And let's just pretend the doctor says, good luck with that, and walks away. You're going to chase that doctor down and be like, doctor, how do you fix this problem? How do I buy from you? How do I work with you? But that doctor never did anything most people think they need for sales. He didn't say, here's all my testimonials. He didn't say, here's all my case studies. He didn't say, here's my degrees, my certifications, and all this stuff. It just showed and demonstrated an understanding of the problem that you're going through. So the way I describe a problem to people is it's an unwanted experience that your audience is going through. And if you can master describing the unwanted experiences your audience is going through, your communication goes through the roof, especially on your episodes. Because that effect that you had in that doctor example where it's like, doctor, tell me more. That's what your podcast listeners can have in the beginning of your episode. If you can nail it, you're like, hey, this episode's perfect if you're dealing with this, and this, and you've been trying this, and this, and it's not working. They start to have the subconscious automation of like, oh my gosh, you're talking about me, my situation. You become hyper relevant to them. But we can also use problems to create educational content too. And most people don't understand this. So let's pretend we took a problem, that my audience is having. So my audience is having a problem with engaging content. They, no matter what they do, how much information they put out there, they can't create engaging content. So I could create content that's called like 5 ways to create engaging content without tutorials, how to create engaging content for course creators in 5 minutes or less, 5 mistakes people make to ensure they don't get any engagement on their content. But those 3 pieces of content come from a problem. So when we understand the problems, not only does it boost our communication and relevancy, but it also guides us to really effective educational content that we can do as well.
This is such a key point. This was something I didn't realize in the beginning. And it's something that, in working with podcasters, a lot of people will often push back and they'll be like, yeah, well, I don't actually solve a problem for people though. I'm here to build a community, or I'm here to create an experience for people, or I have an entertainment podcast, or I have a travel podcast. And now seeing things, having worked with you for so long, it's like, well, I kind of push back on them. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, deeper than that. Like we've got to go deeper. And so one of the problems I see in the podcasting space specifically is that people are blending in because they're sounding like everyone else who's teaching about commercial real estate strategies, right? Or business systems, or whatever the topic or the niche might be. So when it comes to problems, because I'm imagining there's someone listening right now who's probably thinking about this, like, okay, Brandon, cool problems. I see what you're saying, but I don't know that really is my audience. Do they really have a problem?
Every audience has a problem. And if you don't think you do, then you haven't dialed deep enough to figure out what it is. So, like, let's go with the community things. Like I provide a community, there's not a problem. It's like, what's going on inside of someone's life that makes them feel like they need a community? Like something's missing. There's something going on there. So there's always a problem. So what I always say is the easiest way to get to it, in my opinion, is just to ask yourself, what's unwanted experience or what's going on inside of someone's life that pushes them to want this thing that I sell, this course, this program, this service, whatever it may be. There's always something, and you just have to dig down deep enough to figure out what it is. And it is a trial and error process. It's not like you're going to sit down for 5 minutes and brainstorm on a piece of paper. Sometimes you need to talk to people, you need to test it, and not all problems are created equal. So some of them are more relevant to others, powerful than others. And some people then pick problems that people are okay just dealing with, so they can't generate sales because it's not a painful enough problem. So you really have to just dig down, do some research, look at your own past experience, and start to test and interweave these into your stuff to figure out what's really working and what's not.
Yeah. One of the things that you've said along the way that has always stuck with me is go back to the place where you were at the beginning of your journey, wherever that journey was. Yeah. And what were the things that you were experiencing then? And that just put such a perspective shift on it, because looking at it from my level of awareness now is totally different than where I was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And if I can get back to that headspace of where I was, that's most likely the person that you're talking to in most cases, and where they are and what they're experiencing right now.
Yeah, because most of us are like helping people do something or go through something that we've been through ourselves. And if that's you and you're listening to this, well, then tap into your old experience. What were you doing, experiencing? What feelings did you have? Emotions did you have? Thoughts did you have? you start to use that. And that's what builds the relevancy, because I guarantee you, if you were experiencing it, your audience is likely experiencing the same thing. And then just keep your ears open, because they'll tell you. The more people you work with, you'll see it, you'll experience it. And the problems can change over time as well. So it's just an evolution. It's something that just continues to grow and change. But yeah, I think that's an amazing place to start, is just look at your own past experience.
I think another thing that you said that's also really important to note is that there might be more than one problem that you solve.
Yeah.
And that's true in our case, where for the person that's launching a podcast for the first time, they have a different set of problems than the person who's been podcasting for 3 months or 6 months or a year. And knowing your audience in that way too, and some of those deeper nuances, we got to go beneath the surface. Let me ask you this though. What would you say to those people who are like, okay, but I don't want to lean too hard into the problems or always be doomsdaying people, right? Like doom and gloom, talking about problems and being like, beating the people over the head with their own problems. And I think a lot of us, maybe we've had an experience of that in, this online marketing world that we live in, where people are exploiting other people's problems. That's not what you're saying to do.
No, it actually has the opposite effect on it. It makes people feel heard, understood, and validated. So when you do it the right way, people start to feel like, oh my God, they're talking about me. I feel seen. I feel heard. I'll never forget. I first saw the holistic psychologist using this sort of, she's on Instagram, and I started seeing her use this sort of content and messaging and communication style in her stuff. And my wife was like, man, I feel so heard by this lady's content. I was like, what are you talking about? Heard? What does that mean? And then I looked and I was like, man, she's just talking about problems, like problems that come up when you have different attachment styles or different childhood traumas. And those are not those are pretty doom and gloom things, right? Those are pretty big experiences that people go through, but she does it in a way where people go like, finally someone's saying it. Finally, someone understands who I am, what I'm dealing with. No one's been able to communicate this way to me before. And so it actually has this opposite effect where they don't feel bad. They feel like, man, there's actually a solution here. And they actually get excited and you start to build this rapport, and it really hooks people in. And so that's what we find, is it has this really positive effect. It's the opposite of doom, gloom, feeling bad.
Yeah. Going back to psychology for a moment, there are 5 emotional needs that every human has. And one of them is to feel heard and to feel validated. So you're really tapping on something there that is so innate to us as human beings. It's how we're wired. It's how we're hardwired. And it's hard to argue with that, because it's the way that our brains are naturally wired to work, and because we want to avoid problems too, and those survival mechanisms that are in place. Someone's listening to this right now and they're like, okay, I know I need to go deeper on this, but I don't know how to do that. What's the first step that I need to take? Is there a question that maybe you would pose to them, or something that they should start thinking about in terms of a first step to going deeper, to understanding their audience, who they are, and what problems specifically that they're dealing with?
I always like to start with who you want to work with. So starting with their identities, like, is it a course creator, a yogi, a mom, a dad, an athlete? Like what is a term that they're going to identify with? So list out the identities that you want to work with, and then ask yourself, what are the unwanted experiences or problems that identity is dealing with that I want to solve? Because whatever you put in there is what you're going to attract. You're going to attract people that have that identity and have that problem. So it's going to help you laser in exactly who you want inside of your audience. So you want to do that first. You want to be very careful not to put in mistakes. And a lot of times people will mix those up. What I mean by that is you might look at what your audience is doing as a problem, but it's not, because an unwanted experience is the problem. An action that caused the problem, or an action they're doing to try to fix the problem, those are mistakes. So when you write out problems, do not list action items, because those are not problems. Even though you might sit there and go, well, that's the problem. It's like, no, that's what's causing the problem, or that's the thing that doesn't work, or that's what furthers the problem. But what is the actual experience they don't want anymore? That's the problem. And then just brainstorm. And then you just start to test them out, start putting them in content, use them in your communication and your messaging. And you just start to see how they land, how they resonate. And you'll know, like, people will tell you, oh man, when you said that, it really landed, or this really resonated, or sometimes they even repeat it back to you. That's a really good sign when they start to repeat it back to you. So
can you give us an example of that? So let's just say, for your audience, give us an example of the problem and then of the action that they're either doing that causes or to fix, just to help people kind of wrap their brain around these concepts.
Yeah. So the problem would be, you've been posting content that you know can help people, some of your best stuff, and you've been posting at least 3 times a week, and you've been doing it for at least 2 months, but you still have less than 100 followers. Like nothing is landing or taking off. That's the problem. That's the unwanted experience. The mistake that causes it, I would say something like if that's you and you have that problem, I'm willing to bet that 70% of your content is information, tutorial, step-by-step based content. And then the mistake to fix it would be like, and I bet you in order to try to fix it, you've tried either changing platforms like from TikTok to YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, or you just tried posting more, or you didn't do anything and just thought like, eventually it'll take off. I just got to keep doing this. So those are the three things. It's the problem, the mistake that caused it, and the mistake they did to fix it. And then I just combine them all together to build this communication style that gets people to be like, I have that problem, I'm doing that thing, and that's what I'm trying to do to fix it. And it's not working. It makes them feel like I'm heard, understood, but more importantly, I'm in the right place with the right person. And now they're like waiting for you to give them the solution.
And they see you as the expert even more. That trust gets built in that moment because they feel heard, when they feel validated, when they say like, oh my gosh, you understand the problem so well, you must have the solution. They're going to lean in. They're going to want to learn more from you. They're going to stay listening till the end of that episode. Or if you give that call to action, it's like, hey guys, I go deeper, way deeper into this, into the workshop that I teach. It's happening next week. Come join me. They're going to be much more likely to want to take that next step with you because you've created that desire and demand for it
100%.
in that way.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Brandon, thank you for unpacking this for us.
Yeah.
This, for those of you listening right now who have never heard about, messaging or problem or communication in this way, like I would definitely recommend go follow Brandon, go follow his podcast, go follow him on Instagram. We'll link up all the stuff in the show notes for you guys because he has a wealth of information. I followed Brandon for, 3-4 years before actually saying, yes, I want to work with you. And right now you've got people in your audience too, who are those people, right? They're kind of sitting, they're watching, they're learning, they're leaning in. And the more that you are able to do this and communicate with them in this unconscious way to get them to automatically go, yes, you are the person, I need your help. It's going to be amazing for you, your business and your podcast. So Brandon, thanks for sharing all that with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And if you loved what you learned inside this episode, then don't go anywhere because in the next one, I'm going to unpack for you why it can feel like pulling teeth sometimes to get listeners who say they love your podcast to actually take the time to leave a review. I'm going to unpack the 2 types of reviews and the 2 motivations, the things that motivate people to leave a review or not leave a review so that you can tap into this and use this to your advantage to get more social proof on your show. That's all coming up next to help you make your business binge-worthy.